salaries to their high-paid employees. The lobbyists wine and dine characters like Peter Welch, and the political action committees stuff money into his campaign fund. Voila! Peter Welch brags about having $1 million campaign fund, but where did it come from? Your taxpayer dollars came full circle. I call that campaign finance money laundering.
Before we go to our next question, Peter Welch, would you like to respond to that?
Well, two things I'd like to respond to. Number one, there is too much money in politics, and it's gone from bad to worse. With Citizens United, there is just an enormous amount of money that is an avalanche that comes in because loopy billionaires out there, and it can be on the right or the left, target seats. They might pick any district where they think they have a chance of taking over that agenda. So,
but you did. Wasn't it you and U.S. Senator Leahy waving your checks from Lockheed Martin? Wasn't that in the Burlington Free Press?
Can I answer this? I didn't see it in the Burlington Free Press. But there's two things. One, there's too much money in politics, and it's gotten really bad with Citizens United. I support public campaign financing. That's number one. Number two, I support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. And that's really the core of it. Now, hold on a second.
I can prove that you don't support the idea of public campaign.
Am I going to be able to answer?
No, the idea of public financing of campaigns you don't support, because in the U.S. Congress you vote to give money to NPR, which gives money to VPR, and then I am excluded from VPR debates that you are invited to. In 12 years of me being a perennial political candidate, I have never been invited to a general election candidate debate on VPR.
Well, I'm happy to have you, but it's not my decision. It's
it
not
is
Mark's
when you
decision.
vote for money. When you vote to give NPR money and they give it to VPR.
Peter Welch's response. Did you have anything brief to add to that?
I do want to let Chris know that I've never voted for a defense appropriations bill. So the Lockheed Martin does defense work along with other work.
But you voted to give money to the Pentagon.
I voted, Chris, I voted against the defense appropriations bill. All of
that's just one bill.
Focus, well, right, that's where the Pentagon gets its money, but I've had significant objections to it, particularly since so much of that money has gone to Iraq and Afghanistan, which I thought were the wrong things, as a couple of my colleagues said. One other thing, by the way, I just want to say, in the internet sales tax, that's not like a new tax. Right now, if you buy a book at the local bookstore, that bookstore has to collect the sales tax and remit it to Montpelier. If you decide to go to Amazon.com, some of these retailers don't pay that. They don't remit it, even though under Vermont law we're supposed to pay it. And I do believe that our downtown retailers have lots of challenges, but they should be on a level playing field when it comes to the sales tax as the internet email retailers. And that's why I support the Market Street Fairness Bill.
Thank you. And we have another caller.
We'll talk about that later.
Caller, you're on the air. What's your question for the candidates?
Yes, my name is Roger from Stamford, Vermont, and the question I have is first a comment with the question coming after that. Abortion kills a little baby, stops their beating heart, and hurts women, and there have been over 56 million children killed in the womb. Thank God Mark Donka is pro-life. Mark, and then everyone else, please state your position on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this you can answer relatively quickly, I hope. We'll start with Mark Donka. Is that true? You are indeed pro-life?
I am pro-life. I made that pretty plain throughout my campaign. And I'm happy to say, I mean, some of the polls that I've been watching, it actually seems to be that the country's actually swinging more in that direction right now. So I'm happy to see that.
And Matthew Andrews on abortion.
Yeah, well, it seems really Orwellian to call somebody who's against abortion rights pro-life, because in fact, if you look at the agenda of the so-called pro-life movement, they're pro-death in every other way, and including, if you read Mark Donka's platform, pro-military, doesn't care. Once the baby's born, you're on your own. You're pro-life from conception to birth. So, I support a woman's right to choose. I think that the movement against abortion has its roots in a really misogynistic history of trying to control women's bodies. It's been a movement that also was opposed to contraception and women's health care and sex education. And in fact, the irony of the law of these laws, such as what's been happening in Texas recently around abortion, where they've now required the clinics meet hospital-level standards for their abortion clinics. Those are places where it's just not possible, it's not feasible, it doesn't make sense for an abortion clinic. It's just an excuse to shut them down. And they're burdening women with all these kinds of loopholes to jump through. Women who you know, oftentimes don't have any money, have to travel hours, they need a consultation, they have to listen to all this, you know, legally mandated information that doctors don't even agree with. It's just a total mess that ultimately has undermined the right to, you know, what I support, which is free abortions on demand. And in fact, since the 70s, Congress, whether under Democrats or Republicans, has consistently passed the Hyde Amendment, which forbids federal dollars from being spent on a woman's right to choose. And if I were in Congress, I would vote against the Hyde Amendment, and I would make that a key issue.
And Chris Erickson, do you?
If I'm elected, I will write up a bill and hopefully get it passed, stating that for every dollar of federal funding that goes to abortion, there should be an equal number of dollars for adoption, and that every single government-funded abortion clinic that receives so much as $1 of federal funding should also have in it an adoption clinic. So you go into a waiting room and there's 2 windows and you spend time with each and you learn everything about adoption, you know, before you have an abortion. But you have the choices right there. You have, plus there has to be a law allowing real live abortions to be shown on television. You never see that. You never see a real live abortion on TV. You never see the times when the doctors try to, you know, pull a baby out and it comes out live, you know, despite the doctor's intentions of killing it. That happens. So we've got to have federally funded adoption clinics in the same facility, in the same waiting room with the abortion clinics, and give women a much clearer choice. Also, there's one other thing that happens in some cases where a nurse, before a girl sees the doctor who's going to perform the abortion, a nurse gives her a tranquilizer of some kind so that she won't change her mind. If you go to a car dealership and buy a car, they don't give you a tranquilizer so you don't change your mind.
That's a good one. Just to clarify quickly, yes or no, do you believe abortion should be legal in the United States?
It should be legal because there are those people who will always want it, but it should be in hospital-like conditions. You wouldn't believe all the different things that go wrong.
And Randall Meyer, do you believe that abortion should be legal in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, I could give you a blanket yes, and we could talk later about the legality of any of these things, but I'd rather talk about the specific facts of the matter. Mother Nature kills 50% of the meetings of egg and sperm before the age of 4 weeks, so she'd be the first one you put in jail if you outlaw it.
Good point.
It's from a 1980s study. If you want to go backwards in time, it's really a bit of a religious issue that has, like I said, with a dog whistle politics, it's gone underground and not been, you know, overtly religious. They try to say, well, it's a moral or an ethical issue. But I think if I can dig myself a little hole here and promise to dig myself back, or to pull myself back out, I'm going to say, all you monkeys are idiots, okay? And let me climb back out of that now and say we're not monkeys. We don't have prehensile tails. We have a tailbone. We're actually apes, and me included. Holtvig and Foale in the 1870s were the first to see under a microscope the union of egg and sperm. Before that, Darwin, in his 1859 in his Origin of Species, he barely mentioned human beings. It took him till 1870s, on his deathbed, that he released The Descent of Man and spoke extensively about human evolution. And by the way, if I have to be some analog to Darwin here, I am both Darwin and his bulldog, because I'll do my own fighting in the political realm. Thank you very much. I don't need a Huxley. Now, before that, Maupertuis in the 1740s, he wrote a book called The Earthly Venus. With everybody's permission, perhaps I'll get another 30 seconds or a minute here.
We're going to have to keep it short here.
Well, I will. I'll give up some time on another question. But Maupertuis, he proved that there were both eggs and sperm for fish, reptiles, salamanders, reptiles, amphibians, and birds. And the mammalian egg eluded capture until the 1820s and the birth of modern cell theory. So it's really only been 140 years that we can definitively say to religious zealots and other sorts of bigots, we are animals.
Okay,
And
we're
that's
going
all
to have
there
to
is
go
to
to
it.
Jerry Trudell now. Do
Good.
you believe
There's no
abortion
spirit.
should be legal?
No
Well,
spirit.
first of all, I believe abortion should be legal under certain situations. I reject the pro-life concept because the people who claim they're pro-life are pro-life until birth, and then they're cutting school lunch programs and sending people away to war.
What situations under which would you...
Well, for instance, if you're raped, that's a good one, or if the mother chooses because of health reasons or any other reasons. I think the mother should have the right, and I think we're in the dark ages if we take that right away from her. And I think people who don't know history are in the dark ages and proposing to take us back to the dark ages. And yes, Mark, your colleagues are particularly, I say your colleagues, not you, but your colleagues are particularly guilty of this, and this is why I would vote for Peter Welch if it was just you and him. Because he's good. He is good. He is intelligent, educated, he knows his history, and those are the prerequisites to do this job. Not a bunch of know-nothings who know nothing and say pro-life. And yes, dog whistle politics, I like that a lot, because that's exactly the way these people react, in a reactionary fashion. And they put the American people in jeopardy. So pro-life, I reject. Pro-life, are you pro-life? Listen, I'm pro-common sense. That's what I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And Peter Welch, also, someone earlier mentioned the Hyde Amendment. Have you voted in favor of that? And in general, are you?
No, I totally reject the Hyde Amendment. I believe that a woman is the one who has the right to make a choice about whether to have an abortion. I don't think government should be getting involved in that. Roe v. Wade, the law of the land is established by our Supreme Court. Put this under the zone of a private decision that a woman can make. She can make it in consultation with somebody that's close to her. It can be a counselor, it can be a minister, it can be whoever she wants. But why should government be getting involved in some of these most intimate decisions? So I am a strong supporter of a woman's right to choose. I'm concerned that there's a legislative movement among many of my colleagues to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I think that would be a setback for the rights.
Back to the Dark Ages, maybe?
It would be a setback for the rights of
Yes,
rights
I
of
think
women.
it would.
Thank you.
Maybe just the 19th century.
This is the
Okay.
21st century.
And we will go back to the phones.
Great.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, an important follow-up question to my first question that I asked. Representative Welch was the only one that was actually allowed to answer the question about, are you simply going to scoreboard watch while you're sitting in Congress, while you're making votes? The other people did not have the opportunity to answer that, and I would like to tell you why that is so important. And that comes back to a local issue in Vermont back a few years ago called the Marriage Equality Act. While our legislators sat in Montpelier, some of them with strong convictions against it ended up voting for it, but they had so much pressure they wanted to vote against it, but they ended up voting for it. Are you willing to vote your personal conviction? Not watch the scoreboard on C-SPAN as the votes are coming up and say, well, if I vote this way, it's not going to affect it because it's already been passed. That question was not answered by the other candidates other than Mr. Welch.
Okay, thank you very
Take it
much.
away, the other candidates, please.
I did.
Did anyone...
I did, but I also added some other points in the time that I was allotted. I would vote my conscience. I would vote what I believe in. I would vote what is in the public interest of the people. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I said the same thing. I think this question's been fairly clearly answered.
Yes.
I don't think anybody here has said that they're going to watch the scoreboard. And if I could just quickly interject that there are 6 of us here, and I want to get to a lot of different questions. I want to talk about immigrant rights. I want to talk about Israel-Palestine. I want to talk, about the economy, climate change. All of these. We have a lot of issues. You're not going to have less time to speak if you speak shorter. We'll just get to more questions.
Okay, and Ms. Erickson, you sounded like you had something to add?
Yes, I'm an independent candidate. If you vote for me, I'll go to the U.S. Congress, and I'll do everything I can to put all the pork I can into every single bill for Vermont.
Did anyone feel as though they didn't have sufficient chance to answer that?
Just in case he wants to know my opinion, as far as following the scoreboard, if you're going to sit there and just vote on what floats by, you really have to concern yourself with the framing of the debate and who, what particular think tank has thought up what particular bill and has decided to float them along. And really, perhaps the opportunity for any one of us to do a good job down there is to write our own bills and think with our own minds and our own brains.
Thank you. Okay, we have another caller here.
Great.
Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello.
Thank you, and good luck to all the candidates.
Thank you.
I would like to know their stand on poverty,
Good
which is getting pretty much out of hand, hovering around 18 to 20%.
Thank you.
That's really sick. Thank you.
That's why.
Okay, thank you for your question.
Actually. That's a good question. Thank you for asking that question.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Trudell.
Great.
What would
The
you do
entire reason I'm running for Congress is because I'm sick and tired of a permanent recession economy. Vermont has had a permanent recession throughout its history, going way back before the bank melt. 1 in 3 adult working Vermonters are at or near the poverty level. I am one of them, and I'm sick and tired of it. So I have done more than just get on the ballot and rant and vent my rage. I proposed some very specific solutions that will actually work. If anyone takes the time to take it at face value and read my website. Once again, the 1% solution is a transaction tax that will rebuild the poorest rich country in the world that I'm ashamed of because our bridges are falling apart. We don't have jobs. We need a full employment economy. And I tell you, those Republicans and Republicans just are not cutting the mustard. They're leading a nice, comfortable life up on the hill there. They are detached from personal sacrifice. I'll tell you what qualifies me besides my ideas. I am connected to personal sacrifice. I've sacrificed a lot since the big bank melt of 2008, and I'm not going to tell you my life story. But that's why I really mean what I say, and I relate to 1 in 3 working adult Vermonters who are in the same situation. I worked for CJ's Home Improvements. I was in over 2,000 homes in Vermont doing sales of triple pane windows, and I have experienced personally how many Vermonters cannot even afford to keep themselves warm in the winter. And that is a tragedy. Mark, what do you think about that? I mean, I am directing some of this to you because your colleagues seem to be living in the dark ages. Now, I say your colleagues because I spoke with you personally on the phone. We had a cordial conversation, and I'm treating you at face value like I like to treat everyone. But what about your colleagues? Don't you think there's something wrong with people who don't think, use their heads, study, and are aware of history as well as science? And blow a dog whistle, and now everyone votes to send how many more people to the Middle East to be
Mr.
killed?
Trudell, that is your time.
Thank you for saving my breath. But I made my point.
We'll go right to Mark Donka. In terms of poverty, what would you do to reduce poverty in the U.S. in Congress?
Well, one of the first things we do is we have to create jobs. We have to start working on that. As far as to answer Mr. Trudeau's question, I don't have control over the people in Congress. I only have control over myself.
That's why I said
that's
your
one
colleagues.
vote. That's
I'm
one
not
vote.
blaming
So
you,
I
but
have
I'm
no
asking your
control
opinion
over
of
them.
that.
I have no control over them.
But what
If
is
I
your
go to
opinion
if I
of that?
Let him speak, Jerry.
if I go to Washington, I'm going as my own person,
Right, I believe
and I
that.
will, bring my morals, my values, my feelings, my ideas to Washington and try to put them in place. As far as poverty, yes, we do need more jobs. We need to try to help people get more educated. One of the things that's hurting people right now is the cost of college. Higher education right now is killing people. I know I'm paying for 2 college loans right now that my daughters ran up, and it's like having an extra mortgage. One of the issues was they talked about lowering the interest rates on student loans. Great idea, but that's not the real problem. To get people out of it and get them jobs. What we have to do is lower tuition rates. You shouldn't come out of college and owe $150,000 or $100,000 before you even, start your life, so to speak. So one of my ideas would be if a college is taking any kind of federal monies, they would have to lower their tuitions 10% a year for 3 years in order to continue receiving that money. And that's the type of bill I would introduce. And then we would sit after 3 years and reevaluate and see it. Because right now, college tuition has gone up, I think it's 1,000% faster than the cost of living in the past 30 years. That's unsustainable. And that's hurting people to get the education so they can get out of poverty.
Because the research money flatlined. Well,
everybody will get a chance
with respect
to
to
speak.
inflation.
We'll go now to Matthew Andrews. In terms of poverty in the U.S., what would you do in Congress to reduce that?
Well, I am the socialist candidate in this race, and so just to want to maybe take a chance to explain that, because it certainly comes out of a history of the labor movement. We have to understand that poverty is created because of inequality. All people who are poor in our economy, poor or marginalized, are dependent on selling their labor in exchange for a wage, or else are dependent on others who do so. And we know that any employer will only pay you as little as they possibly can in order to extract profits. And that has created inequality in our economy. And, you know, for all of Jerry's bluster, I didn't hear anything that goes beyond market solutions. You know, the 1% transaction tax, I think it's a great idea for as far as it goes, but it's not going to change the boom and bust cycle of the capitalist system. As a socialist, I advocate workers taking control of the means of production, whether that's in the immediate sense of forming worker cooperatives, but also I've called for the nationalization of the fossil fuel industry, which would certainly be a major redistribution of wealth. Liberty Union candidates have called for guaranteed income for everyone, which would do away with a lot of the bureaucracy around, you know, little programs that, you know, you qualify